Hello and welcome to this very special episode of Akrinos Access. I'm Eric Matei, joined by a remarkable guest in Michelle Johnston. Michelle is the author of the best-selling book, The Seismic Shift in Leadership, How to Thrive in the New Era of Connection. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us here on Access.
Oh, thank you, Eric. I was really looking forward to this all day, and thank you to your listeners for being with us.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, look, I know based on our conversation prior to this, I think you and I realized that we probably have the makings for perhaps future episodes. A lot of content to touch on in this world of leadership, but coming into this, we thought that it would be most effective to really take it from the ground level, right? In realizing that many of our viewers out there are eye doctors who are either in private practice or they're ready to take that leap into private practice. So really looking forward to this conversation, framing up how doctors can become better leaders right now in their practice. So let's take it from the top. And I suppose for starters, share with us some of the inspiration behind this, where you saw the need and kind of what prompted you to pursue creating this masterpiece.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, so I've been a management professor for over 20 years and was kind of doing my thing, teaching my students, and also I was an executive coach. And so that's where I started to see a real seismic shift, which is why I named my book The Seismic Shift in Leadership. I'm 53 years old, so I was surrounded by, in my mentoring, I was surrounded by authoritarian leaders, and that was very much the norm. And I was totally okay with that. That was typical. And I saw that a lot of the leaders that I was coaching, if they had were subscribing to that more command and control, leading with power, just do what I say, don't ask any questions. It's called work because it's supposed to be hard. They were getting pushed out of organizations. And I started thinking, whoa, wait a second, because Eric, I was that type of professor. I didn't come out of the womb as this, my whole thing is about connection now. I came out of the womb, trained by really successful people who were hardcore command and control authoritarians. So I think that's what really got my attention, because I had tried it unsuccessfully in the MBA classroom. As a young new professor, I wanted to be successful, and I tried to lead with power and only power. And guess what? You're not truly connected with your people when it's all about power. And so I realized at the time my sphere of influence was maybe 350 people a year. I was up in front talking about it. I was like, no, I need to save more people, because if leaders continue to think that that's what it takes to be effective and successful, that style of leadership, we've got to get the message out. It is all about connection.
Wow. And what I think is most fascinating about this also is that you're a professor, you're a PhD, you are a scientist first and foremost, and that's what I think is so fascinating about everything you're doing with the seismic shift in leadership, and realizing that in the modern era, connection is going to prevail over authoritarianship. Could you perhaps share an example of how you've kind of seen that manifest, where you've seen this authoritarian failure?
Yes. And so what I was seeing was the leaders who were getting pushed out were wearing this mask of perfection. They wanted to be successful, right? And so every day they'd come into work putting this mask on, and their people were losing trust with them because they thought, you're not authentic, you're not real, you don't really look at me as a full human being, you don't necessarily care about me. And so when you lose trust with your team, A, you're no longer seen as a leader, and B, what I realized is that perfection equaled disconnection. So for the leaders who were wearing these masks of perfection, they were not connected with their teams at all. And then my book was about to go out to the publisher to be printed in March of 2020. And so now we're in lockdown, and I'm realizing, I called my publisher, I cannot publish a book where the whole premise is about the importance of connection when we're all on this planet Earth now disconnected. I
Sure.
said, let me go back. And you had mentioned that I'm a scientist. So in order to write this book, I didn't just trust I didn't even just trust my observation skills that I knew it was happening. I went and I interviewed 18 global leaders so that I could better understand what the heck connection looked like, felt like, sounded like, because I knew that that's what it took to be successful. But even I didn't really know how that played out. So I had all this great data. And in March of 2020, I called my publisher. I said, please give me some time. I need to go back and let me figure out how to connect in a time of disconnection. And so I think one of the reasons why the book is a bestseller is because it was published as we were all coming out of the biggest era of disconnection. And we're all still trying to figure out how to connect in hybrid, how to connect when workers still want to work from home. How in the world do you connect in this new era?
Fascinating stuff. So I suppose on that note, and I'm looking forward, and I would imagine our viewers also are probably looking forward to just a few simple things they can do in their day-to-day. But before we jump into that, share with me a bit more regarding, I suppose the first step is for someone to shed that mask of perfection, right? But that's difficult to do, right? It's absolutely difficult to do. So is it something that can be shed? Can someone who is perhaps a bit more authoritarian, can they come to have a bit more of a connectivity, or is this kind of more an innate skill?
No,
Or what?
totally, it absolutely can be done. And here's why, is because we've all lived during the pandemic, we realize that old demarcation between you just have to bring your professional self to work and you leave your personal self at home. We're not putting the toothpaste back in the tube. Our lives have all been smashed together, and we now see dogs and babies, and we see people's kitchens and UPS and spouses. And although that might not be as extreme as it was when we were at lockdown, we're still not going back. And in order for you to be truly effective as a leader, you have to see your employees as full human beings with lives, not just the results that they bring to the table. And ergo, you have to show up as a full human being who also has a life, right? I'll give you an example. One of my excellent leaders who I'm coaching right now, he said, Michelle, we just bought a new house. I really want to invite my people over to a cookout, but my former company and former boss told me I couldn't do that was too personal. I said, no. Those lines are gone. I want you to bring your people over, invite them over, and also give them permission to not come. Don't put pressure and say, oh, the boss is throwing a barbecue, so you have to show up on your Friday night. Say that I would love to have you over. We just bought a new house. I'd love to share it with you and have you in the backyard. And if you can make it, great. If not, I understand you have a personal life and you might have Little League and you might have important events. That's okay. And so seriously, he did it, and only about half came. And he said, you know what? And I was impressed that people did say, I would love to be there. And I do have these personal family commitments. So it's seeing people as whole humans and showing that you care. Another thing, you had asked Eric about, little strategies, is when you're on a call and it's a monthly team meeting with your people, right? And I would hope that your eye doctors are having those monthly team meetings, and they probably are doing it in person, whether it's on Zoom or in person. Begin with some sort of connection question. I just interviewed Juan Martin. He's in my book. He's the global president of Kind Bars, Kind Granola Bars. They've done an incredible job. And I just interviewed him for my podcast. And the last that I saw him, he was stuck during COVID in Madrid, Spain, where he's from, with his wife and two tiny children, without even a door to his office. And he would be on, he's the global president. So his days really never ended. And whenever we would have an interview together back then during the pandemic, his precious little bitties would come and hop on his lap. And in the middle of the call say in Spanish, Dad, when are you getting off? And Juan never made apologies, because that was his world, right? So I just interviewed him last month for the podcast. I said, Juan, what has changed? And he said, well, let me tell you. He goes, I'm back in Manhattan, thankfully. He said in our house, he said, we reconfigured our entire space at Mars, our corporate office, so that our employees keep telling us they want to still be hybrid. So they might still be working at home Mondays and Fridays, but when they're up and they come into the office, we want collaboration. We want face-to-face. He said, I don't even have a door. He said, because it's a whole different way of working. I said, okay, that's great for the people who are in Manhattan, but Juan, you're still the global president. How are you connecting on Zoom? And he lifted up his espresso cup and he said, Michelle, I'm a European. He said, my people know when I have a meeting with them, we begin by having a cup of coffee and we talk personal. So for your eye doctors out there, when you have your meetings, you begin with something personal that shows you care about your people more than just the results that they're bringing. That's what I mean by connection.
Love it. Absolutely love it. And you know what? There's a couple things you unlocked there. One of them, most notably, that struck me, right, is realizing that the whole of your organization can be so much greater than the sum of its parts, right? And I think if we were to look at this in that regard, it's kind of the aha moment, right? Authoritarian presumes that it's coming from one mind. Wow, how limited. What type of constraints are being placed on the organization if it's this authoritarian, rigid structure, as opposed to connectivity, collaboration. And I think what some folks perhaps don't realize, and maybe you can speak to this, right? Is it that folks think that authoritarian conventional management, and I'll say that's another thing too, huge difference between management and leadership. Maybe you can speak to that as well for our viewers. But looking at that, authoritarian structure, hey, we have an organizational chart. Everyone has to report to someone. Everyone's being held accountable. There's no other way to keep things organized unless we have this rigidity. And I think some folks think that, man, if we go this connectivity, collaborative route, it's kind of this hippy-dippy. How are we going to get stuff done? How are we going to deliver on deadlines? So maybe you can also speak to some of what you have seen firsthand with these organizations that embrace collaborative connectivity and what it means to the bottom line, right? 'Cause at the end of the day, these are businesses.
I love it. And that's a great question. And yeah, I do get some CEOs that I coach. I do get some pushback. They're like, Michelle, I'm the CEO. We've got to increase our revenue by 30%. You're telling me on my team meeting, I've got to ask how their vacation was. And I said, you know what? Yes, you do need to, because connection drives results. And that's what we have found, is that your productivity is higher. Your decision-making is better. Your people will attempt to take some risks that are needed to be innovative. If you spend time building a connected team and you show your people, and a lot of people have asked too, okay, well, what exactly does that mean? And to me, the definition of connection is, do your people feel in your presence that they are seen, heard, valued, and appreciated? And I'll say that again. Do your people feel seen, heard, valued, and appreciated? And if so, then you're doing a good job of making them feel connected. And if they feel connected, then their engagement is higher and financial performance follows. As a matter of fact, my colleague, Dr. Kendra Reed, and I were really interested if we could show that financial performance absolutely is driven by connection. And we collected data at manufacturing facilities. They're actually facilities that took car batteries out of cars and turned them into pourable plastic paint cans. And we went around these manufacturing facilities and we asked questions about the climate, about leadership, about listening, about, do you have a team where you feel like, A, you can speak up and ask questions, B, that your leader does something with it, and C, that you're valued. And those teams and those organizations who had what we call this positive team listening environment made more money. So yes, yes, and yes. I can understand why leaders who haven't been introduced to this concept of connection maybe are a little bit skeptical, like, I've got to just focus on business and results and the bottom line. But in order to go that fast, you've got to go slow first, and you've got to build those relationships. There was just a great newsletter yesterday that I read by the president of 100 Coaches, and I'm a member of the top global executive coaches in the world, and he's our president. And he sent out this newsletter that chronicled what he is calling the fifth dimension leadership. And all it is explains exactly what I'm talking about. The fifth dimension is where we are right now. And the fifth dimension is focusing on the relationship first, knowing that if you do that, results will follow. We're in the fifth dimension. We can't go back. The old way is transactional, and it just doesn't work.
Yes. And I suppose this is where, if we are in the fifth dimension, we should say it is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. I mean, we couldn't let that pass us up. But no, it's fascinating that you're speaking all these things, right? Because it is so right? So our team here at Akrinos, I mean, we interact with doctors from across the industry, from across North America. And it's fascinating to see, and coming to know these doctors and working with their practices can definitely kind of see where that collaborative, open environment that starts with trust. And I think that's probably one of these key pieces as well. If we dig even deeper into this, right, it's trust, right? Human connectivity through trust, and that no matter what you're doing, right? For our viewers out there, if you're taking care of patients, expanding your scope of care, recommending some specialties to your patients, hey, it's all about trust. And likewise, if we look at leadership within your organization. Okay, so let's get back to something else that I know is really fascinating, that I think a lot of our viewers will appreciate, and that is, let's also distinguish between leadership and management, right? As being kind of two different functional concepts, if you will. So maybe if you could kind of speak to that difference between leadership and management.
Yeah, management was much more about control, right? You're controlling the environment. A lot of managers are micromanagers, right? They control the information, they control, they try to exert a little bit too much control. That's the negative side of management. Whereas leadership, the positive side of leadership, is really about servant leadership, that you are leading others. You are helping to develop others. And leadership, I mean, to me right now, Eric, and all the leaders that I coach and all the leaders I speak with, I realize leadership is freaking hard. It's hard, right? And it's getting harder. However, it's also one of the most unbelievably, how would you describe it? You just cherish it because you have such a positive impact on others. It's incredibly rewarding, but it is hard. And so management, if you just look at it, it's much more about control, and leadership is about developing.
Sure. Yeah. And I love hearing you say that. We do a lot of work with cold starts, right? So we're working with a lot of doctors coast to coast who are kind of ready to make that leap, and absolutely realize that there is a role for leadership. There is a role for management, right? Management processes have to get done. And I think that's very important for all of our viewers to take away. Again, when we're talking about the seismic shift in leadership, the new era of connection, it's not some hippie love-in hangout where we're not doing anything. No, absolutely not.
Oh gosh, no. It is all about accountability and results.
Absolutely. But realizing that, again, as people, as society, we have gotten away from the authoritarian approach. I say we've gotten away. People still do it, but I think now we're starting to see, and thanks to the work that you're leading, right? The research you're doing, your publication, executive coaching with all of those leaders. And by the way, viewers out there, definitely, before we hop off today, we'll let you know where you can find a copy of this. You will love this book, and you will reference back to it. It's great. A lot of great pearls, a lot of just inspiration in there as well from these leaders you've connected with. But it's fascinating to see as you've brought this work to the forefront, and then now you're starting to do some research around the results and seeing that the results are panning out. This is huge. So, okay. So I feel like we could probably go hours on end, but I know we try to keep these really tight. This has been a wonderful conversation, Michelle. So I suppose as we're kind of wrapping things up here, what are a couple of best practices that someone could do? Maybe just a couple of things that someone could do. Hey, look, starting tomorrow, whether it's amongst their associates, right? And for starters, whether you are president of an organization or whether you are entry level in your organization, what can people do to become better leaders in the workplace?
Yeah, you wouldn't believe how many times, and I'm on my book tour right now, and I'm so blessed to be up in front of audiences, and I'll have questions and answers afterwards. And I can't tell you how many people come up to me and say, I quit my old job during the pandemic because I was living alone, and my boss never even asked me how I was doing. Another person came up and said, I finally left my jerk boss because I was living alone with a dog, and he doesn't even know that I have a dog, and that's the only thing I had. So many people, in the great resignation, the great reevaluation, great reprioritization, they finally said enough. And that's what's really driving so much of this, Eric, is it is hard enough to find labor, and it is even harder to keep it. So you want engaged employees, and you want to be able to retain engaged employees. And how to do that is to embed time for connection. So I just delivered a keynote, and at the very end, I asked I think there were 80 leaders in the room, and we stood up in a circle. I said, okay, I want you to share your best practice. Give me 5 best practices. What are you doing to connect right now? And one of them said they do it the hour power. And I said, the hour power? She said, yeah, because I want my people to know that the most powerful thing they can do is connect. So get out of their offices and go and round. And these are not people in hospitals, but they call it rounding, right? Get out and go. It's the hour power. Get out and round. And so some of my leaders who are leading with their employees are still at home. I said, what Salesforce.com is doing, because their employees are also working at home, is they're actually building retreat centers. Now, not everybody is a Salesforce.com to have the money to do that, but what they're finding is they can't make them come into an office because employees have so much power now, and they're really demanding much more flexibility, but they are embedding these quarterly offsites to say, we need to see you. We need to have lunch together. We need to collaborate together, to do team things together, because it's hard to build trust day in and day out when you only have virtual meetings, right? So I tell my people, embed time to connect. If you can, to see your people, take them out to lunch. I've got teams who now play pickleball together. I have teams who will work out once a month together. Those who play together stay together, right? I've got teams who will send little meals, and occasionally they can once a month like cook together because they're still in a hybrid work environment. The point is, do things to show your people that they really care. I'm also telling people to disrupt, because if you don't disrupt now, when are you ever going to disrupt? I'm telling people to blow everything up, how you meet, who you meet with, how long you meet, what a meeting looks like. So I've got a CEO of a hospital who said, Michelle, he's over an entire region. He said, Michelle, I am tired of those formal 2-hour Friday meetings where everybody comes buttoned up and they just like regurgitate. And he said, I'm now doing, 3 15-minute huddles in the morning. We're having coffee together. And I want them to give me updates. I want to have a conversation. I want to know how I can get the barriers out of their way, how I can help them to succeed. And I think that's a great representation, Eric, of where we're moving, the seismic shift. We really are moving from that old formality, the way things used to be so much more buttoned up, and now saying, have an actual conversation. Let's have a more casual conversation together, and you're going to accomplish so much more.
Wow. Love it. Absolutely love it. Such great stuff. And I got to tell you, just like right here, I mean, if I'm sitting kind of like this, and Michelle, you know this, I am always inspired whenever I hear you speak. So this was absolutely fascinating. And by the way, so I suppose to kind of wrap things up, for those viewers that are wondering, like, how often has Eric heard Dr. Johnston speak? Yes, if you heard me mention Dr. Johnston, I actually was fortunate enough to be a student of Professor Johnston, as I knew her for many years, both as an undergrad at Loyola University and then again as a graduate student at Loyola. And to this day, I'm very proud to consider you, Michelle, a mentor and a friend.
Oh,
So
Eric, it's been my true pleasure to see you grow and just blossom. But I always knew you would. I mean, even when you were 19 years old and I taught you as an undergraduate, we can tell, we try not to tell, like we don't want the whole class to notice that we can tell the rock stars. You were definitely a rock star, even at the age of 19. And Eric, I've just loved watching your journey. So well done, my friend.
you're too kind. You're too kind. So, okay. So to wrap it all up, where can folks score their copy? And perhaps also, I know you recently launched, you recently launched your podcast. So how can folks get in touch with you, check out the podcast, get a hold of the book?
Yeah, so you can buy the book anywhere books are sold, local and Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Target, wherever you want. Yes, I did just say Target. And so it's called The Seismic Shift in Leadership. And then go to my website, www.michellekjohnston, and that has my podcast. We've launched 3 episodes with really cool leaders, and it also has all the podcasts like yours that I'm on, if you want to listen and learn a little bit more about how you can be a connected leader, because connected leaders get results.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Michelle Johnston, thank you so much for joining us here on Access. For all of our viewers out there, on behalf of all of us here at Akrinos, I'm Eric Matei signing off. Wherever you are, whatever you're up to, just keep reaching for the stars and achieve your goals. Have a great week.